What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Fringe. Welcome to Budget Day. Boy, what a doozy we have for you guys today. Now, I want to be clear at the time of filming this video, I wanted to share my opinions and thoughts on what was going on with the budget. Again, some details are missing to the budget or perhaps going to be elaborated on at a later date. So take this video with a grain of salt. Again, I just wanted to go over what was announced, what it means for taxpayers or Canadians in general moving forward, and maybe discuss a little bit of, well, what we just witnessed. And boy, the times they are a-changing for Canadians as we move forward. I've got some footage here that I want to share with you guys. Leave it to the paid prostitutes of the Liberal government to broadcast the budget. And there's a reason I went and recorded this while watching, and it's because, well, their explanation and their ability to try to cut slack to the Liberals is laughable at best. We're going to go over all of that. Again, I got about roughly 12 minutes of footage here, so we got lots to go over. And again, I'll be stopping periodically to interject my thoughts and explanations as we move forward. So bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get started right ahead. Here's Chrystia Freeland introducing the budget in the House of Commons, and then they move to actually what the budget was. Now, these paid prostitutes were, of course, brought into the House of Commons earlier this morning and given the budget ahead of time. Now, they were under embargo as to what they could or could not discuss until it was presented in the House. But let's go. Let's get all the details.
Faster. We are making life cost less. We're driving the kind of economic growth that will ensure every generation of Canadians can reach their full potential. And we're making Canada's tax system more fair by ensuring that the very wealthiest pay their fair share. We're doing this because a fair chance to build a good middle-class life, to do as well as your parents and grandparents.
Take a look at Stephen Guilbeault sitting there. Look at his cold stare towards the Conservatives. He yells at them at one point. You can see him, his mic's off, but you can see him yell, "Come on," the Conservatives. But it's great. Just watch his icy cold stare. It's the only redeeming part of this clip of Freeland.
Or better, has always been the promise of Canada. But today, Millennial and Gen Z Canadians can get a good job. They can work hard. They can do everything their parents did and more. And too often, the reward remains out of reach. They look at their parents' lives and wonder, how will I ever be able to afford that? The same anxiety haunts those of us who care about our younger generations, their parents and grandparents. What many parents have achieved for themselves, a degree of comfort and security, we want for our children and grandchildren. We want their hard work to be rewarded, as it has been for us. We want them to look forward to a future with a sense of anticipation, not angst. Nous sommes arrivés à un moment charnière pour les milléniaux et la génération Z. Ces gens ont un talent et un potentiel immense. Ils ont besoin de voir.
They're going to get into the discussions of the budget here as she goes into French. Again, we don't have to watch the presentation of the House introducing the budget, but it's important to notice that she talks about the future. What they're focusing on here are the Gen Z millennials, the 35 to 45 age demographic, because that's where they're hoping to get their votes in the next federal election. So they didn't want to up income tax for anybody in this budget. They don't update any kind of work taxes or anything like that, but there is a lot that's going to affect people who are incorporated, people with small businesses. So just a little bit of a warning shot here, folks. If you have a small business or if you contribute to a small business, well, things are about to get crazy. However, the amount of spending that's going into their fake policies is even worse. Let's go.
Et de croire que notre pays peut fonctionner à leur avantage.
Hey, that's the Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland. She is now delivering the federal budget, which means we can reveal what's in it. Our reporters, including our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, has been in the budget lockup all day long and joins us now. David, a heavy spending budget, that was expected. Is there an overall theme that brings it together?
Well, it is a scattershot budget from a government that's behind in the polls, looking to have a little bit of something for everything. This is a 400-page document. It's stuffed with spending commitments, as I said, a little bit for everybody. But if there is a theme, Donna, it's this. It's a government that is trying to reach out to Canadians under the age of 45, and that would be your millennial and Generation Z voters. The first 80 pages of Budget 2024 details how the government will spur the construction of nearly 4 million new homes within 7 years.
We are.
Before we get into Freeland, and again, I got to interject, folks, so that we understand exactly what they're talking about. 4 million homes over the next 7 years. Now, keep in mind, if Pierre Poilievre gets in, when Pierre Poilievre gets in, things are going to change in this decree of budget. But when you talk about 4 million houses over 7 years, and we're averaging, 300,000 migrants, if not 500,000 every year coming into the country. Now that's based off of last year's statistics, because I haven't seen anything formally. I think it's much higher than that, to be honest, when you look at what's coming over the borders, what's coming into the country, especially when we look at what we're bringing in from places like the Ukraine, when we're bringing in people from Israel, Palestine. It's going to get crazy. Building 4 million houses over 7 years isn't going to fix the problem, especially when those houses are tiny little apartments like we saw Chrystia Freeland posting about or bragging about in Victoria at $500,000.
Building more homes at a pace and scale not seen since after the Second World War. Making it more affordable for Canadians, especially younger Canadians, to rent and to buy a new home.
There is more than $8 billion worth of housing initiatives in the budget, which the government says is aimed at helping young Canadians achieve the middle-class dream of owning a home.
In terms of an outlay of resources, another something in $8 billion approximately in new resources is relatively ambitious in this environment where we're still running with elevated deficits and debt.
When we get into housing, when we talk about people buying houses in this country, you're saying that it's the middle class dream to buy or own a home. If you live in places like Toronto, where the average home is over $1 million, or Vancouver, over $1 million, where Pierre Poilievre has infamously said it takes roughly 25 years to save up a down payment for those houses. And I know if you look back at my previous video, I don't want to get too much into what these 30-year mortgages are doing to people, because I go into great length in this morning's video to talk about that. Highly recommend going back to check that if you want some information on that, if you haven't seen it yet. But one argument that came up from one of my viewers in that was, well, I'm a financial planner, and people, you don't understand the benefit to the first-time home buyers plan to withdraw RSPs to go towards this home. The problem with withdrawing those RSPs is that if you're withdrawing in order to put down your 5% down payment, the majority of your RSPs are going to home insurance. It's going to CMHC Genworth, with only a very small amount, roughly $3,000 to $4,000, actually being put down on your home. Factor that into the first 5 years of your payments, which are essentially interest. You're not paying down dividend essentially until you're 5 years in, unless, of course, you're amongst the very privileged who can afford to put extra down on your mortgage. What the government is doing is essentially in championing people to take out of their savings. I understand that RSPs, when you put them in, the government gives you money back every year, and that you can put those towards adding on to your down payment or writing off taxes or whatnot. But the problem with RSPs is they're supposed to encourage you to retire one day, not to have to pull them out to buy a house, not to mention the fact that you have 15 years to put that money back in or face penalty, again, for the money that the government gave you to put it in. If the government really wanted to encourage homeowners to buy a plan, it would be reducing interest rates and helping to provide more homes so the cost of living goes down, and encouraging young millennials to buy homes and pay down their mortgages faster so that they're debt-free faster, and essentially could boost the economy by spending more money on goods and services.
But there's a host of other items clearly aimed at younger voters. $500 million, for example, set aside for a youth mental health fund. And Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland repeated the commitment for free birth control pills through the National Pharmacare Plan. And there's some non-monetary items like new rules to control the price of concert tickets by cracking down on fraudulent resellers, or bringing in a new right to disconnect, preventing your boss from texting or emailing you after hours. All the spending initiatives add up to $57 billion.
Okay. $57 billion to stop concert ticket scalping? Is that... and free birth control? This is the government's priority at a time when people can't eat, when people can't pay their electric bills, when they're being taxed to death in carbon taxes. $57 billion? Think about the money we've sent to the Ukraine. Think about money that we've sent to other countries in aid for essentially, well, the Ukraine's labeled one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Again, I feel for the people, what they're dealing with over in the Ukraine, but $57 billion for birth control and to make sure nobody's paying too much to see Taylor Swift? Give me a break.
Over 5 years, a third of which will be offset by an increase in capital gains taxes.
I think the government, wanted to do this additional spending, so they looked at probably what would be the least offensive measures that they could implement in terms of economic drawback.
We go any further, again, I want to talk about this capital gains tax. Again, if you're a small business owner, if you're incorporated, this is to charge corporations for capital gains. So if you have a home corporation, if you have a home business, get ready, because it's not just the wealthiest. It's not, who they talk about often, the Westons or any high corporation chain that's paying more taxes. Of course, they're going to hit with those taxes. However, it's also centralized to focus on the common working person rather than investing back into the business, that you're going to pay more capital gains taxes in order to make up for their ruthless spending.
And Donna, you mentioned off the top, you showed some of the announcements already made on the spending side, and it's that capital gains exemption. That is the new thing that we're learning about today. That is, quote unquote, the wealth tax. There will still be capital gains exemptions for a lot of people. For instance, if you sell your principal residence, you don't pay any tax. Certain kinds of small businesses will continue to pay capital gains on the regular rate. But the government says there's 40,000 tax filers out there, 40,000 wealthy Canadians all. They are going to pay this increase in the capital gains tax. And those 40,000 people, the government is going to collect $19 billion off of them over the next 5 years. Donna.
All right, David, just taking some notes there. This government, as we know, is not doing particularly well in the polls. They're way behind the Conservatives, if you believe the polling right now.
There it is. There's the one clip I was looking forward to showing everybody. If you look at the polls, at least if you believe them right now, again, government shills. Shilling for the government. These prostitutes. Well, don't believe the polls, ladies and gentlemen. The Liberals are losing, but they're not losing as much as the polls say. This is laughable at best. Again, with that capital gains tax, what they try to put the blowback on here is, it's 40,000 of the wealthiest people in Canada that are going to be paying those capital gains taxes. No, it is going to go on to small businesses as well. Don't let that statement fool you. Of course, legacy media, they like to stretch it out. We're going to be paying the price when it comes to what corporations are on the hook for. And again, we have a financial analyst who gets into that later in the video.
How do you think this budget might help them recover some political ground?
It's going to be very difficult. The pollster, Shachi Kurl from Angus Reid Institute today, had a line I think it's useful to think about, that when the Liberals start to talk right now, a lot of Canadians, to keep using the millennials, I guess, are putting on their AirPods and tuning right out. They're not hearing anything. This budget, though, is so thick with spending commitments. I mean, literally, there's a new right to disconnect rule that the government's going to introduce, which will give millennials the right to tell their boss, don't text me or email me after hours. All sorts of little things in there that the government hopes some aspect of an electorate is going to grasp onto and hear the government's message and maybe start to appreciate them a bit more.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people might appreciate that right to disconnect, but I'm curious about the detail, because I just don't know how you legislate that. But David, what did you think is not in this budget? What might have some people expected to see that's not in there?
Okay, there's a couple of things. One of the big things is, remember, the NDP are the Liberals' minority government partners. The NDP must support the government if it's going to pass, and I'm sure they will. There's some things in here that I think they're going to appreciate. But one of the things the NDP wanted was to tax grocery store chains, to tax oil and gas companies. They thought that's the way to go after what they say corporations coming after people. There are no measures to increase taxes on corporations other than that capital gains tax. So that's not in the budget. We also heard, I think, there was some talk about getting pension funds, Canadian pension funds, forcing them to invest in Canadian companies, and there's no movement at this point so far on that. So those are a couple of things not there. We can also say there's no changes to your own personal income tax rate. It's not going up, it's not going down, and there's no changes to the GST. I always think that's important, that for most Canadians, your tax environment, your Canada Child Benefit, all those things, by and large, staying the same.
Okay, you know what? I was going to get into the chief expert that we saw earlier commenting in the videos, but you know what? I think we've heard enough. I think we've heard enough when it comes to the shilled prostitutes of the government. Basically, in a nutshell, folks, they do confirm later that it is going to affect small business on the capital gains things. But what should alarm people the most out of this budget is, again, $57 billion in additional spending that essentially is going to come from the wealthiest in Canada, when they're really only looking to keep the deficit the same, they've said, as it currently is. So there's no improvement on the deficit laid out. There is no getting out of the mess that we're in. And what should alarm Canadians to the most extent is that the top priorities of this government isn't a matter of balancing the budget. It's sucking up to Gen Z and millennials, telling them, hey, give us your votes because we don't want your boss texting you when you're outside of work. That seems to be their priority versus, bringing down the cost of food, bringing down the cost of fuel, bringing down home heating costs, bringing down the carbon tax or anything that's going to hinder your existence. This is where people should be very worried, that they're worried about birth control, concert tickets, free mental health for people. Now, don't get me wrong, mental health is important, but the problem isn't that, there's no outlets for mental health. It's that we don't have enough counselors available to handle the level of mental health crisis that this government has caused on its own citizens. We are facing a major fork in the road here. Now, essentially, again, I wouldn't look too much into this budget because it's only going to stick for a year, and then Pierre Poilievre's coming in to switch it around. But it's alarming to think that with everything going on, if the Liberals really wanted to appeal to people, if they really wanted to appeal to voters, if they really wanted to get some form of performance going into a next election, they would have tried to scale things to be more beneficial towards all Canadians, not just Gen Z and millennials. What this tells you, what you should be scared as hell about moving forward, is that this tells me this government looks to just completely bury us before they get out of office. They're going to take whatever they can. There will be no shift in terms of behavior. We're probably going to see billions of dollars more given to more countries in war supports and efforts to launder money. I mean, aid countries in their time of need. It's scary. The outlook is very scary. And I mean, just like these shills try to press on that it's very, I guess there's a little bit of space to breathe, that income tax hasn't gone up, that GST hasn't gone back up. We know the fight that Stephen Harper endured in order to lower it from 7% down to 5%. So I was honestly expecting it to go back up to at least 7%. So there was rumors circulating at one point it was going to go to 9%. So to see that not come into play, I mean, that's a somewhat of a silver lining. But when you're looking at a turd, there really is no silver lining, is there? Let me know what you guys think about the budget down below in the comments. Again, as more develops on this budget, I will be talking about it more. We'll get more in depth into these talking points about what happened. If this is your first time to the channel, if you're new here, if you enjoyed this, make sure to click the subscribe button, turn on your bell for notifications so you can come back and join us anytime we talk about these things. But what a day, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't know what to expect moving into this budget. And well, I have to say I wasn't surprised. I was definitely underwhelmed with what the Liberals are trying to do when their priorities, again, are don't text me when I'm not working and and free birth control and cheaper concert tickets when people can't even afford to eat. But again, folks, leave me your comments down below. Make sure to leave a like and a comment on this video. The government is going to be suppressing the hell out of this video to make sure that other people don't see our opinions and views, especially from a small fringe minority here on the channel. But make sure to share it out. It helps us greatly every time you leave that thumbs up and a comment. Don't forget to join us live every Friday on the channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central for Friday Night Fringe, where we're going to go over everything that happened this week, everything coming up in the week ahead. And I got a feeling the budget is going to be a very in-depth conversation on this week's live stream. Join me there. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you there and hearing what you guys have to say, not only in the comments, but in that live stream. It's always the pinnacle of my week to sit down and chat with you guys, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you there. I hope you have a great rest of your day, as hard as that's going to be. I'll catch you on the next one.